Hey, what's happening, YouTube? Justin Stoddart here. Back to our series about sales as leadership. This episode is going to tell you why you need to stop talking and start listening. So the reality is, whenever we enter into any sort of sales environment, sales situation, oftentimes what happens is that we begin to explain to them why we're better, what our background is, what our story is. The reality is they don't care. We just need to stop talking. They don't care. I know that sounds harsh, but all of us are the same way too. The only thing they care about is themselves at that very moment. And the minute that they begin to care about you is the minute that you start to position yourself as somebody who can solve one of their problems or help them to take advantage of an opportunity that they're currently missing out on. Okay. So how do you do that? How do you position yourself as such? Okay. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about the focusing question of getting to the bottom of what it is, like what's the one thing that if they were to do it, if they were to fix that one thing, it would make everything else easier or irrelevant. And we have to realize that whether they know what that answer is or not, we have to get there. We have to get there quickly because they're not going to give us much time. It's essential for us to get really clear on the fact that we're only a means to an end at that point. I was on a phone call today with a prospective client, and he was telling me that he's already met with several of my competitors and then how he was entertaining sending business their way. And as I listened to him, I began to perceive some of the things that I had researched about him and what I already knew about him. And he didn't even say it. He didn't mention, even I think had I asked him, what are your biggest challenges, he would not have known. So part of this starting to talk about what their biggest problems are, sometimes we don't know what they are. We have to do the research in advance to be able to identify what those problems are and then be able to kind of float them out there in order to throw up like a test balloon. Sometimes you'll hear that in the political world. You'll have somebody who wants to run for president, but they don't know if they have any chance. And so they'll float up, what's called a test balloon. I believe that's what it's called. And it gives people the ability to identify, how was that received? Do we have a pretty good following or do we not? And if we've got a pretty good following, then people will proceed kind of further down the steps. So for you need to be sending up test balloons to identify, again, this is if you were to ask them the question and they don't know, right? This is a way for you, the fact that you're dealing with a lot of different clients, you should start to recognize that there are themes and there are patterns and there are trends that people are always struggling with in business. Okay, so I happen to know that this was a newer agent leaving a bigger team, stepping out on their own, and that bigger team didn't put a lot of emphasis on getting business from their sphere. So I knew that coming in. Okay, so as I threw up that test balloon. And asked him the question of, where has the majority of your business come from? And he said, it's interesting. It has come from my sphere and I haven't put a lot of emphasis there. Okay, so that was a bit of a test balloon. I was asking a question, not a direct question, but I was asking a question as to, where does most of your business come from? That allows me to identify that it's come from his sphere, even though he hasn't put a lot of emphasis there. So again, the whole context, the whole purpose of what we're doing as we start getting into these sales conversations, whether they be in person, over the phone, via email, we've got to be getting to the point of what they care about. Because again, they don't care about us. They really don't. Now they will at some point, as soon as we position ourselves. So as soon as I then identified what this agent needed, and then I began to talk about a solution for that. And then I began to build a background about myself. Okay, at that point, once I identified the problem and he'd confirmed it, and once I had began to share with him solutions that I knew would work, they needed his kind of buy-in, then at that point, I was able to then take the next step to then build the background with him, to be able to say, this is why I'm uniquely positioned to help you with this thing. And then the question was easy. When is a time that you and I could connect in order to talk about implementing this thing? Again, confirming the next appointment, getting the business gets super easy once you've, one, identified what the problem is, and two, shared a solution and positioned yourself as the person who could best help implement that solution. But again, none of that happens. None of that happens. Let me repeat myself. If you come into the equation and say, let me tell you about myself, let me tell you about all that I've done, let me tell you about my company, let me tell you about what we've done in order to help other people, let me tell you about all of our unique tools, all of our unique offerings, let me tell you about all my past clients that I've served. At that point, they don't see the relevance. They don't see the connection between who you are and how you're going to solve their problem. Okay, that ends it. They shut off. They're just trying to find a way to get out of the conversation and get off the phone with you. Whereas if you can, again, go back to the whole focus, the whole point is, how do I find out what they care about? Okay. Once you start to do that, whether it be a direct question, whether you feel like they really know, or whether it's setting up test balloons to test it, to test your hypothesis, because you've come into the equation with kind of a theory as to what you think is their biggest concern, then at that point, you can start to move down that path. So again, sales is leadership. You're leading them to the conclusion that they need you. You're leading them to the understanding that they have a problem. Sometimes you're leading them to the reality that they have a blind spot they didn't even realize. Okay. That's how, one of the ways in which sales is absolutely 100% leadership is you're actually guiding your client to help them see things that they couldn't see and help them to realize that they are not going to be able to reach their potential in their business without you as their partner. And that's really how I ended up the call today. I said, look, there's a lot of providers out there that can do exactly, offer much of the same thing, exactly the same thing. The difference is this: here's what I can do for you. And it hit exactly on that pain point that he had confirmed, that we had discussed. And then I ended the call saying, I'm going to send over some times where you and I can reconnect to go through and talk about how we implement this thing. That's where sales gets easy, where sales gets fun, is where you're not a solicitor, you're not a vendor, you're a leader, you're a mentor, you're a peer, you're helping them, you're leading them to a better business that's going to help fund their better life. So I hope this has been helpful. Look forward to catching up with you on the next one.